salary arbitration. The Scheinman Conflict Resolution Club and the Sports Business Society have been collaborating over the course of a couple months now. Both teams are really prepared for today's arbitration, and we're really excited about it. The Scheinman Conflict Resolution Club will be representing Carlos Correa, and the Sports Business Society will be representing his team, the Houston Astros, in an arbitration over his salary. And before we begin the arbitration itself, we're just going to take a couple minutes to introduce our organizations, Carlos Correa, and how the baseball salary arbitration process works. I'm going to pass this over to Shaloni.
Hi everyone, my name is Shaloni Pinto. I'm a senior at the ILR school, and I'm also the president for the Scheinman Conflict Resolution Club. So first, I wanted to speak a little bit about the Conflict Resolution Club. Our club is a student-led initiative of the Scheinman Institute, and we're comprised of both undergraduate and graduate students. And we're interested in advancing our dispute resolution skills primarily through events such as these, and also having more educational exercises, meeting with professionals, and making sure that conflict resolution is something that students can get involved in, both undergraduates and graduates in the ILR school. So I think Ian will introduce SBS.
Hi everyone. First off, thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. I'm Ian Capel. I'm the co-president of the Sports Business Society along with Harrison Marcus. We're really happy to have you here today. So about Sports Business Society, if you don't know, basically we're a club that has about 5 main components, sometimes 6. Basically we have a speaker series where we have various ILR and Cornell alumni come and speak to our general body members about pursuing a career in sports. We have bi-weekly debates where we talk about and discuss all the issues going on in the world of sports business. We have a weekly radio talk show that's on cornellradio.com, which is actually on tonight at 8 p.m. if you guys want to check it out. And you can find the link on the ILR Sports Business website. In addition, we have a semesterly magazine that's going to be published soon where we post very in-depth articles about various issues going on in the sports world. And now we have an upcoming and a very active blog where we have articles going up multiple times a week by various general body members. The club has been continuing to grow. We've been working with alumni to create various events such as the ILR Sports and Entertainment Executives Summit that happened this past semester in New York City. And we're really just happy to have you and happy to be able to present this arbitration with the Conflict Resolution Club.
So today we wanted to present on our arbitrator, who is actually the Kenneth F. Kahn Dean of the ILR School and the Martin F. Scheinman Professor of Conflict Resolution, Dean Colvin. And we're really happy Dean Colvin could be here because a lot of his research focuses on arbitration in non-union workplaces. And so arbitration in the sports business sort of arena is very different because it focuses on final offer, especially within the MLB. And so we wanted to have a final offer arbitration setting where we could discuss arbitrations outside a unionized workplace, but also have someone who's quite experienced in understanding that. So thank you so much for being here, Dean Colvin.
Thank you, and I'll be strictly neutral today. No favoritism amongst the presenters.
Just so a brief overview of the event, Ian, Shaloni, and I will take about 10 minutes up here giving an introduction to the arbitration. Then the Conflict Resolution Club will have 12.5 minutes for their argument in favor of Carlos Correa. Then SBS, and on behalf of the Houston Astros, will have 12.5 minutes to give their argument. Then there will be 5 minutes for rebuttals, first the player, then the team, as is customary in real MLB salary arbitration. And then Dean Colvin will have 5 minutes to give his arbitrator decision at the end. And be sure to stick to the end because we're going to have pizza in the Ives Student Lounge after the event ends. So. And then just a brief introduction on Carlos Correa. He's a shortstop for the Houston Astros. He was born on September 22nd, 1994. He was the first overall pick of the 2012 MLB draft. He made his major league debut 3 years later in 2015, where he won the American League Rookie of the Year award. He was an All-Star in 2017, and in 2017 he was a World Series champion. Moving along, so how a player is eligible for salary arbitration in Major League Baseball. It's used for players who are not yet eligible for free agency. Players become eligible for free agency after 6 years of Major League service time. So players who have 3 or more years of service time, but less than 6, will be eligible for salary arbitration. And there is one exception to that with Super 2s. That's if players with 2 years of experience meet a special designation criteria. And a player is deemed to have reached 1 year of Major League service time upon accruing 172 days with the team in a given year. And I'll pass this over to Ian.
So above are the submitted salaries, and the reason this is important is because of what Shaloni said earlier, that this is a final offer arbitration. What that means is that Professor Colvin will pick what side he believes is closer to what Carlos Correa deserves. So the final amount that Professor Colvin can choose is either $5 million as requested by Carlos Correa, and they will provide an argument for that, or the $4,250,000 that is argued from the Houston Astros team. The midpoint is used so it's easier to see, what side that you feel that it's closest to in terms of the asked salaries. But the final offer, it could only be $5 million or the $4,250,000. And that's with all MLB salary arbitrations. So here's just, his history of salary. He's had an increase of salary for the past 4 years, starting from $330,000 to, in 2018, making $1 million. So this is important just to show a steady growth in his salary, and it's going to be used by both teams in their arguments. In addition, here are some of the statistics that we're going to use, including and especially home runs, RBIs, batting average, but we're not going to be using, as per the collective bargaining agreement, any advanced statistics. These are almost all the statistics that we're actually going to be using, and here is just a couple examples, and I'm sure both teams are going to get into more as the arbitration moves forward.
Also, one thing to note is this arbitration is taking place as if it happened before the 2019 Major League season. So we're pretending we're in like January or February of 2019 right now. So that's why you didn't see any 2019 stats up there. And then most importantly are the 6 main factors of the arbitration decision according to Section 6 of the collective bargaining agreement between Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball Players Association. First is the quality of the players' contributions to the club during the past season, which is commonly referred to as the platform year in arbitration hearings. Second is the length and consistency of the players' career contributions. Third is the player's record of past compensation. Fourth is comparative baseball salaries, where each team will, or each side will compare player to players of a similar position with a similar salary structure and compare their stats one way or another. Fifth, any existence of physical or mental defects. And sixth, the recent performance of the club. And with that being said, we will pass it over to the SCRC team to represent Carlos Correa in their argument.
Good evening, audience. Thank you for coming, and good evening, Mr. Arbitrator. On behalf of SCRC, we would like to thank you for negotiating or mediating this salary negotiation. We're gathered here tonight to represent Carlos Correa, otherwise commonly known as Shorea or I Am Groot. He's a shortstop for the Houston Astros, and we also argue using sound reasoning and logic for why he rightfully deserves an upcoming salary of $5 million in the upcoming 2019 season. We hope that given the strength of our arguments and rebuttals that you will agree and come to the same conclusion as us. First, speaking on the first factor of arbitration, the quality of players' contribution to past season. We would like to argue that this past season, in addition to the 3 other seasons, Carlos's performance overall was great. In 2018, Correa saw notable increases in fielding statistics, primarily placing first or best in errors and on-field percentage for all qualifying shortstops in the American League. We argue that evaluating fielding statistics like on-field percentage and errors are really important when determining Carlos Correa's value for the team, because considering that for 3 out of the 4 seasons, he was a shortstop. A shortstop is arguably the most difficult position for infielding in all of baseball. and so therefore fielding statistics are very important. In addition, though, his batting was also great. He had above average and great on-base percentage. You can tell he has a great eye because he has a consistent base on balls or walking with 53 in the 2018 season. His slugging percentage is on par with the high standard the MLB sets, and his runs scored are very consistent as well, being the same as his 2015 season, which was award-winning, in which he won Rookie of the Year. In addition to his overall performance seen on the field and with these statistics, though, we argue that there's a star quality or power outside of the field as well. This can be seen with his social media presence. Carlos Correa is someone who brings in a big fan base. He has a large social media presence, seen with his almost 1 million followers on Instagram and close to 300,000 on Twitter. This social media presence and following is not only greater in comparison to other notable shortstops like Francisco Lindor and Corey Seager, but also top MLB players in general, like Mookie Betts and Jose Ramirez. Certainly, for his age, he's leading the pack in terms of the sheer amount of people who follow him. This is important to consider because the audience should also be considered when evaluating Carlos Correa as a whole. He brings in audience members, which translates to ticket sales for the Astros team. Since 2015, when Carlos Correa started playing for the Astros, audience viewing has increased, and that trend has continued in 2018. Second, we're talking on the length and consistency of the player's performance. We would like to say that since Carlos Correa started out 2015, he's been a very skilled and talented player, especially for his age. And that trend has continued all the way throughout the 2018 season in a consistent and upward trajectory. Just in terms of awards and rankings, in 2015, his first professional season, Carlos Correa was named Rookie of the Year, and rightfully so. 2016 saw multiple Player of the Week awards, and in 2017 he was named All-Star and also helped and contributed to the World Series win. And as mentioned before, in 2018, he was ranked #1 in fielding statistics for all qualifying shortstops in the American League. Looking more specifically at the statistics from 2015 to 2018. From 2015 to 2016, he had an increase in runs batted in, batting average, on-base percentage, and base on balls, in addition to an overall increase in relevant fielding statistics. 2016 to 2017 saw even bigger increases, seeing an increase in RBI, batting average, and OBP. In addition, in 2017, there's a huge increase in WAR, showing an immense value overall as a player. Averaging all of his statistics and taking into account his age when comparing the past and present shortstops affirm that he is indeed one of the greats in all of the league. Given 1 year from when he was 22 to 23, Correa's batting and fielding statistics were better than those of Ernie Banks, the famous Hall of Fame shortstop. Alex Rodriguez, considered one of the best, if not the best, shortstop of all time, for record holder Grand Slams, 14-time All-Star awards, and 3-time MVP in the American League. In addition to Derek Jeter, another highly awarded player, Cal Ripken Jr., and even current superstars like Francisco Lindor. These players are all known as the best shortstops of all time, yet at his age, 23, Correa is beating them in talent and skill, as highlighted by his comparable batting and fielding statistics. His batting and fielding statistics explain why he is ranked one of the best, if not the best, shortstop in the MLB. He's consistently ranked top 3, according to notable sources like MLB.com and ESPN. In 2016 specifically, he was ranked #1 shortstop for the MLB in that year. Overall, for the quality of players' contribution past season and the length of consistency for players' performance, we argue that while his primary position is shortstop, he is a good overall player and also plays to his position very well.
Thank you. Today I'd like to talk about how we have a disagreement between salary given compensation currently versus what he's been paid by the Astros since he's gotten into the league. 2016, we have a salary of $516,700, which is essentially, as you can see here, near the minimum of what a Major League Baseball player is eligible to earn. This is the player who was the Rookie of the Year. We're still paying this great shortstop near minimum. I think this is one of the reasons why we're in arbitration today. Why are we still paying this man so little? As you can see, we moved 1 year forward, yet we're still paying at minimum, $535. This is an issue going forward. We believe that Carlos Correa is worth far more. The MLB is able to honor contract salaries above the minimum. The Astros have not been willing to budge from that minimum. We also want to talk about his contribution to the Astros as an indicator of how much the Astros are worth this year in 2018. We all know that they're Major League Baseball champions, and we see that in revenue. We see that in the Houston Astros jump. Obviously, we have a team that has money to spend, yet why are we still paying Carlos Correa minimum? We believe that this man is worth far more than the simple salary of $1 million going forward. We believe that this arbitration is important for his worth to the organization, as well as the amount of money that the organization can now spend. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So next, we would like to look at some comparative baseball salaries as well, and we would like to bring these up to the point that $5 million is a very reasonable salary compared to other top shortstops and other players who are similar batters to Correa. So first, we look at other top shortstops, and first up, we have Xander Bogaerts, and we see here 6.91 times the amount that he was making from 1 year to the next year, based on having very similar shortstop performance as Correa. So if we would extend this trend from Bogaerts' earnings to Correa's, we would see an over $6 million salary for Correa, meaning that the $5 million that we're proposing is very reasonable, and that it is what he deserves. We see the same kind of trend for Addison Russell, who was ranked a top shortstop in 2016, and we see 4.96 times his salary from 2017 to 2018. Again, that trend for Correa would put him at almost $5 million, which is what we're proposing. Next, we see a comparative salary based on batting performance. Khalil Green. We see the same over 5 times increase in salary from 2006 to 2007. Again, extending that trend to Correa, we would see an over $5 million salary for him as well. So, in conclusion, using all of the comparable batters and players who we could come up with here, the top shortstops and the players who are similar batters to Correa are all earning increases in their salaries that would put Correa's salary at $5 million or above based on his performance.
Mr. Arbitrator, good evening. I'm here to talk about the existence of any physical and mental defects. Thankfully, we are talking about a player who does not have any mental defects. That said, there have been a couple of injuries during his career. One of the first ones was in 2016. He had a shoulder injury that put him out for the month of September. Nonetheless, he did maintain pretty decent and, in fact, really good stats throughout the year. He was still the youngest player in history at the time that this happened to hit a home run on opening day. And as we saw, his stats compared to other players in previous parts of the presentation, they are still comparable despite having had that injury that year. In 2017, he had a torn thumb ligament from a specific incident. He ended up missing 42 games because of this injury, but still played throughout it. And it was a similar injury that had been done by another player named Mike Trout from the Angels team, who missed 39 games, but he was still considered MVP candidate and led the major leagues in cumulative wins above replacement for that that particular year. And despite that injury, he did continue to contribute to the team and help the team win their very first World Series, and he was named an All-Star player for 2017. Now, 2018, he did start experiencing some lower back soreness and a back injury in June, but despite that injury, he still continued to train. So the injury was not so severe that he could not continue to still keep fit, do some kind of physical exercise, and keep in touch with the team. And despite that, he came off of the disability list in August. And even though this is something that I'm sure for the Astros team, we would encourage them to remember that the existence of injury itself is not sufficient to undervalue the player. So his contributions to the team have still remained consistent despite that these injuries have been occurring. And the player is highly resilient and has been learning from his mistakes on a consistent basis.
Finally, we would like to present the performance of the club in total. Prior to the Astros hiring Correa, they were in a huge rut with a losing record as low as 31% in 2013. Since Correa was hired, they've had a winning record all 5 years, and every year they've had a 13% increase in their win percentage. If you can see from the numbers here, 2015 they were barely sitting at 0.53%, and in 2018 they're finishing all the way at 0.63%. It's been upward except for that small dip in 2016, but even so, it's a 10% increase since then. And 2018 was the best winning percentage the Astros have ever had in their history, with 2017 being the second best with Correa. And finally, the Houston Astros were the World Series champions, and that was majorly due in part to shortstop Carlos Correa. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Seitz, and tonight, the Houston Astros organization and myself will be presenting our side of the Carlos Correa case. Houston Astros are officially offering Carlos Correa $4.25 million. We want to emphasize this is under the midpoint. Our comparables are Xander Bogaerts of the Boston Red Sox and Marcus Semien of the Oakland Athletics. We chose these comparables because of their similarities, statistics, based on measures on baseballreference.com, a trusted MLB resource. Additionally, both players compete as shortstops in the American League, It is important to note that these comparables were both first-year arbitration eligible of a similar age and point in their careers when they received their salaries. Additionally, our main source of comparison are platform years at arbitration eligibility, most recent season prior to going into arbitration. 6 factors are as follows: platform year performance, career length and consistency, salary history, comparative baseball salaries, physical and mental factors and influences, and finally, recent club performance. These factors are all valid in regards to the most recent MLB collective bargaining agreement. Thank you.
Okay, now I'd like to take a quick look at some of the stats between Marcus Semien, Carlos Correa, and Xander Bogaerts. Once again, these stats are brought to you by baseballreference.com. As you can see, Carlos Correa is at or slightly lower than both of his comparables in statistics like OPS, which is your on-base percentage plus your slugging percentage, his batting average, his home runs, his RBIs, which is runs batted in. The main thing I'd like to discuss is his career length and consistency. Over the course of his 3-year Major League Baseball career, Carlos Correa has dealt with numerous back injuries and a thumb injury that cost him over 50 games in 2018. In comparison, both Xander Bogaerts and Marcus Semien have missed almost no time in the majors, just other than Marcus Semien's 2017 wrist surgery. Also, Carlos had a lingering leg issue in the minor leagues caused by a broken fibula. So between his leg, his thumb, and his back, he's missed over 100 games in his professional career. And that's it.
So as Ian and Harrison presented earlier, the salary history that the players have is listed here. The salary history is as follows. So Carlos Correa has $535,000, or as his original salary 2 years before arbitration, and then $1 million, which is a huge upgrade compared to what's usually on the scale, the rookie scale that comes in. So when a person when you get a minimum offer, you get certain amount, and then for 3 years you have a scale until you get to arbitration. So his offer originally was pretty generous, the $1 million. The current midpoint of the arbitration that's happening this year is 4.625, and the Houston Astros are making an argument that it should be lower than that midpoint. Xander Bogaerts went up from $543,000 to $650,000, and then jumped up to $4.5 million. So we are going to argue throughout this presentation Xander Bogaerts is a better player, and we're going to argue that a lot of his statistics are better than Correa, so that the arbitrator should rule below the midpoint rather than above. And we feel that Semien is a comparable player, maybe a little bit worse, but a comparable player who got $3.125 million in his first year of eligibility for arbitration.
So if we look at these counting stats for the three players, Correa, Bogaerts, and Semien, these stats all show hitting statistics and productivity of their hitting. So if we look at home runs, extra base hits, and RBIs, it all shows power and basically their productivity as a hitter. So Correa had less plate appearances than Bogaerts, and Semien also had less plate appearances than Correa. But we see that Correa and Semien's production is relatively similar, although they are both less than Bogaerts. If we look at a more per plate appearance statistics, we see that Correa and Semien are almost exactly similar, while Bogaerts is much better. Average shows hitting production based on how many hits you get per at-bat. On-base percentage shows how many times you get on base per plate appearance, and slugging is basically your power, so it's your total bases. So extra base hits are worth more than regular singles. So we see that this was basically per plate appearance. Correa and Semien are very similar, while Bogaerts is a much better player. And this is in their platform year, so the year right before salary arbitration.
All right, so next, another important perspective to look at is their versatility in terms of their offensive production. So this is stolen bases. Base running is the third main component of value a baseball player brings to the field in addition to offense and defense. And as we can see in Correa's platform year, he brought less value in that aspect to the field. And so now this is probably the most comprehensive and important statistic to pay attention to. So this is WAR, which is wins above replacement. So essentially what that means is it aggregates all essential core basic aspects and statistics of offensive, defensive, and base running, sort of proportional to their relative importance in a baseball game, and then aggregates that into one number in terms of in the index of wins. And so what you see here is that Correa in his platform year was about third as valuable as Bogaerts and fairly comparable to Semien. Another important point that I'd also like to mention is that in determining what Correa's salary should be next year, we should not base it upon what his performance was 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. We're paying him for what we believe his performance will be his next year. Thus, the most recent evidence, the most recent statistics are by far the most important. And the best and most accurate and unbiased way to assess his value is by comparing him to other players. It's hard to just arbitrarily cite values, but this is one of the most important and easiest way to sort of comprehend his value in terms of overall on-field performance.
Okay, so if we take a look at Correa's physical and mental health, we can see, as the player said, that Correa has been injury prone during his career. He suffered a season-ending fibula injury while he was in the minor leagues in 2014. In 2017, he missed 42 games because of a thumb ligament injury, and in 2018, he missed 36 games with a back injury. What's especially concerning about these injuries is that these aren't sort of the one-off injuries that can occur to any player. Sorry. As the player mentioned, that injuries do occur in Major League Baseball. A lot of the injuries that we're worried about are injuries that we believe are likely to reoccur. So if you look at Correa's back injury in 2018, that wasn't due to any one incident, that was due to normal wear and tear. And so much of a player's valuation, his ability to be valuable to a franchise, comes from his ability to produce on the field. And so when you have a player who you're not sure can play through the whole 162 games of a season, that's very concerning to the franchise. And if you look at other influences, Carlos's representation mentioned that he's very popular with the fans, which we agree. We love having him on the team, and he's been great with the fans. However, in terms of what we expected from Correa, that he hasn't really lived up to our expectations. When we signed him and we picked him with the first pick in the 2012 draft, we expected him to be the franchise player, but he's actually been overshadowed by players like Justin Verlander, Jose Altuve, George Springer, and Alex Bregman. So he hasn't really become the face of the franchise that we expected him to be. That's also evident in jersey sales. Teammates George Springer and Jose Altuve sold more jerseys in the MLB, but he has been getting votes for the All-Star game, including in 2017. And if you look at the value to the franchise, it's certainly true that the Astros franchise has skyrocketed in value in the past few years, but we would attribute that to a general overhaul of the franchise rather than just the addition of Correa. We've added multiple new stars, which is and Correa has been a part of that, but overall, that overhaul of our roster is what's bringing fans out, not just Carlos. And if we take a look at recent club performance, we've included the Astros performance as well as the Red Sox and the Athletics performance because that's who Xander Bogaerts and Semien play for. So if you look at the Astros, like I said, we've definitely performed much better in recent years, but that's been due in part to Correa, but also a general overhaul of our roster. Whereas if you look at the Red Sox and the Athletics, they've been less fortunate than us, but that's because they're relying solely on those players to produce for them, whereas we have a much more talented all-around roster that helps us win games. Because at the end of the day, all 9 players on the field have to contribute, not just one, to win a baseball game.
So, to conclude, we wanted to emphasize our key points. We wanted to say that comparable salaries usually, especially for shortstops in the AL, dictate the market, and our comparable salaries, as you see with Semien in the years that he got to arbitration and Bogaerts in the year that he got to arbitration, you can see that they're comparable salaries. In Semien's case, he's much lower, and we showed you on the statistical graphs that we made that they were similar. And Bogaerts' salary is less than the midpoint as well, and we believe that Bogaerts is a better shortstop and a more key shortstop to have on your team. We wanted to emphasize Correa's injury history. Correa has not played a full 162 games, and he's been hurt almost every year that he's been in the bigs. That's very important, we think, when you're thinking about paying a player as an organization generally. If they have an injury history, whatever it might be, it adds up, and we feel that that's important to emphasize. We wanted to emphasize platform year performance because platform year performance, as my colleague mentioned before, is most important and the most recent factor that we have to assess a Correa on. Correa dipped in performance and batting average and a few other statistics this past year before arbitration. And in general, his performance compared to comparable players mentioned by us and other comparable players who might not be shortstops is also, we think, worse where the player is asking for compensation and above the midpoint. So if you look at players that are getting paid above the midpoint, you see that compensation is, players that are getting paid above the midpoint are better players, and players that are getting paid below the midpoint are also sometimes better players. So we wanted to emphasize that. Thank you.
We're going to give both sides 2 minutes to prepare their rebuttals before we get started with the rebuttals. All right, we're going to get started up again. We will get started.
All right. So thank you, Mr. Arbitrator. We just have a couple of comments that we'd like to go ahead and give in response to the Astros team. So first, we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the stats that they gave for the physical and mental defects. The team acknowledged that, yes, there were 42 games missed in 2017, but the 36 games missed in 2018, we do understand that the back injury is a concern, but the 2018 injuries were actually a decrease from the prior year, so 36 versus 42 games. So yes, even though there was a concern about the degree of the injury, about the amount of games played, he's actually missed fewer games in 2018 because of an injury and then in 2017, and that was the year that he actually helped the team on to win the first World Series, and he ended up getting an All-Star awards. And according to Forbes and plenty of other general baseball statistics, I mean, in 2018 alone, 558 players were placed on the disabled list. So injuries are relatively common in Major League Baseball and don't necessarily have to be career-ending just because there are games missed in this particular aspect. So the list could include all-stars like Clayton Kershaw, Steven Transberg, Corey Seager, Madison Burmer, Miguel Cabrera. These are all players who have had injuries before but are still considered all-star players even though they've been on disabled lists. And another team, the Washington Nationals, which is a national team with a win record for the past couple of seasons, just like the Astros, they had players lose an average of 763 games per season over 5 seasons, but they were still considered winning teams, even though these were games missed due to injuries. And yes, I mean, you could make the argument that he's injury prone, but actually not at all compared to other players. Even though he re-injured his thumb, he still ended up winning an All-Star. He is in tune with his body and he knows how to properly heal the injuries that he gets. So like I said before, he actually has not missed any training time. He wasn't so out of commission that he wasn't able to continue to train. And because he's so young, he could, just continue to get better and possibly undergo growth spurts into the 20s, and that might make him more susceptible to injury at times, but as our main point is that these are not career-ending items.
Another point that I'd like to address is the platform year. So the Astros team mainly pointed out batting statistics for the platform year, which we argue, first of all, is not overall a bad year, considering good statistics like SLG, balls on base. In addition, for the statistics that did go down, we argue that is an outlier, given that before 2018, Correa had over 20 home runs until 2018. And in addition, news from his manager, AJ Hitch, says that basically we know from his manager that he was suffering from some back pain, but postseason he looked very strong. He was able to score some more home runs and a double, which caused his manager, AJ Hitch, to move up the shortstop in order. So basically his manager and the team understand that Correa does have potential, and so therefore it is not good to just evaluate Correa on one season, which was arguably an outlier for a lot of statistics. Instead, we should look at his past record of overall excellence and consider that the next season he has the potential for, again, another great season. In addition, the team mentioned the statistic of stolen bases, which we argue that the Astros team actually gave a press release saying that they wanted their players to steal less bases, so it is a team decision instead of a player decision. And so before Correa basically played professionally, he was able to steal a lot of bases, but he stopped, which is correlated to the team wanting him to stop. In addition, the Astros team mentioned the WAR. The most recent WAR statistic did go down, but we argue this is not relevant. And from 2015 to 2018, the WAR increased. In 2016, he had the 16th WAR of the whole MLB for all players, and in 2017, he was ranked 9th for WAR statistic.
Thank you. And then finally, yes, I just wanted to reemphasize that the base running statistics are misleading because coaches were instructing Correa to do that. And beyond that, they're not the most important contribution that Correa is making to this team. His most important contribution is his fielding excellence. Even in the platform year, which our opposition says is one of his poorest years, we see the lowest number of errors in his entire career at 6 and the best fielding percentage at .984. He should be compensated, based on that excellence, not based on solely batting statistics, as his role as shortstop is meant to have a great fielding percentage and have a great fielding statistics, as well as be a great batter.
Who's going first?
Okay, starting with statistics, Carlos's representation pointed to Carlos's very commensurate fielding experience. However, they point to two factors. One, his low number of errors, but we would argue that that's due in part to the fact that he hasn't played that many games, so he simply hasn't had the opportunity to commit errors. And then they point to a fielding percentage that is admittedly very high, and it's true that while Carlos is on the field, he does field well, but overall, he wasn't the best fielder in 2018. In fact, at his position, the American League issues the Gold Glove Award, which is given to the best fielder at the position. Carlos didn't win, and he wasn't a runner-up. Andrelton Simmons of the Angels won. So that it clearly indicates that he's not the best shortstop in the American League, and he wasn't in 2018. And we'd also argue that for WAR, the statistics that this was one of the statistics we presented that clearly shows that Xander Bogaerts is a much better overall player accounts for fielding. So within WAR, their fielding and your offensive production goes into that statistic, and that statistic clearly shows that Carlos is overall a much worse player than Xander Bogaerts, who is making less than the midpoint.
So another point that I like to hit on, one of the main cruxes of Carlos Correa's argument was that we, the Houston Astros, have been grossly underpaying him. So I just like to point out a couple of facts. So the way we pay Carlos Correa is according to the structure of the collective bargaining agreement. And so we're just going based solely off that. So in the first 3 years pre-arbitration, it's essentially unheard of to pay a player more than $500,000 or $600,000. And we gave Correa a $1 million salary in a pre-arbitration year, which shows that we are not underpaying. In fact, we are showing that we appreciate the contributions that he brings to the team, and we are paying him fair value. And we are applying that same mindset to the salary evaluation of $4.25 million that we're presenting today.
They talked about Carlos Correa missing less games for injury in 2018 than he did in 2017, where in fact he only missed one less game. He missed 52 games in 2018 compared to 53 in 2017. So injuries are a pretty big problem. In roughly the same amount of games, 109 versus 110 in 2018, he had 9 less home runs, .076 less of an average, .068 less of an on-base percentage, and his OPS was over 200 points lower. So clearly in a similar amount of games, he had much less production in 2018, which was his platform year.
We additionally wanted to make the point that our revenue, the Houston Astros revenue, was brought up in an argument that the players' representation made at the very beginning. This isn't admissible in a case where you're arguing for an arbitrated player. You can't use the amount of revenue that a team has to argue whether he should be getting paid more or less. And I'd also argue that the Red Sox can pay just as much as the Astros can, if not more, to pay Bogaerts. If you were to argue team revenue, and Bogaerts is getting paid below the midpoint in the case that we're discussing. Also wanted to mention how the platform year that we are talking about is very important because you see his injury history, you also see his possible production, and during his time, if you want to argue that his fielding statistics were great, during the time that he played, you also have to look at his batting statistics, which was a .239 batting average, which on a lot of teams would not be a top 4 hitter. So that's our case. Thank you.
So now, if Dean Colvin is ready, we will have 5 minutes for the arbitrator's decision.
All right. Shall I go? I think you're mic'd up already. I'm mic'd up already. Okay. I'll turn around, though, so I can see everybody. So the arbitrator's task in this case is to apply the factors set out in the collective bargaining agreement, right? So as the neutral arbitrator, my job is to apply the factors in evaluating the arguments that were very ably made by both sides. Both sides have really put forward strong cases for each of their sides. I've got 6 factors that I have to look at, right, that I'm going to consider as factors here. And this is set out in the collective agreement. So, firstly, the quality of the contribution during the past season, this platform year. And both sides put forward strong arguments here. The Carlos Correa side put forward the arguments about the fielding statistics, the social media presence. The Astros put forward the arguments about the batting statistics, right? And they're emphasizing the noticeable lower batting statistics in the platform season. That was one of their main arguments. On that factor, they probably slightly, I think, have the slightly stronger argument on that factor, that there is this noticeable drop in the platform year. The second factor that I have to consider is the length and the consistency of the players' career contributions going back 2015 to the present. There, the Korea side presents the argument about his very high performance earlier on in his career, the Rookie of the Year, the strong stats through 2017. The Astros side suggests, well, there's some concerns with injury that affected some numbers. On the other hand, looking across the balance, I think the Korea side has a little bit stronger argument on the second factor, that there's this career consistency there. The third factor, the record of the player's past compensation. Here, the argument is from the Korea side that he's essentially at the kind of minimum level. The Astros argument is, well, that's what we always do. We always do about the minimum level, and we did go up the year before. This is another factor. I think the Korea side have a slightly stronger argument, right, that we do have very high performance with very low salary earlier on in the career. The comparative baseball salaries, right? This is a tricky one to analyze. We have comparators assessed by both sides. The Korea side, Xander Bogaerts, Addison Russell, Khalil Green, and the Astros side, Xander Bogaerts again, and Marcus Semien, each trying to make their comparisons there. These are difficult to make. One limitation of the argument made by the Korea side is that you argued based on multiples of the jump from the minimum salary to the current salary, right? I'm not sure that's the right metric to use. Really, we want to know what has been received by the similar players in at the similar point in the salary arbitration point. So that was a slight weakness, I think, on the argument there. Both sides, I would say that we could have heard some evidence on outcomes of bargain salaries as well as arbitrated salaries. So that would have been interesting. Those are publicly available, so that could have been there. I would say slightly the Astros shade that argument because of the comparisons, the way they're made. I was looking for an argument, some evidence of somebody who made $5 million in the arbitration. On the injury question, the physical and mental defects, it's good to hear that Carlos Correa does not have mental defects, so that we didn't have an argument over that. The injury one's tricky, right? There's clear evidence of injury here. Certainly this is common in baseball, but there's certainly clear evidence of injuries, which I think Astros have a slightly stronger argument there on that factor. Lastly, club performance, recent performance record of the club. There, I think clearly Korea has the stronger argument. The Astros have done very well. We don't know if they're going to win the 2019 World Series. I think it might come right down to the wire that, they've got a good shot, but, who knows? I mean, clearly it won't be some out of left field team like the Astros. We know that, or not, the Nationals, right? We know the Nationals aren't going to win, but Astros could win. Here, certainly, there's the argument there. The rebuttal, both sides have some good rebuttals on the issues. This is a tough call. So if I were in the position to pick a salary, right, to set the salary I would think is correct, I might be inclined to pick something like Bogaerts' salary of $4.5 million. Because that's a comparator. It doesn't seem a bad comparator, but I'm not in that position. I am I'm a baseball arbitrator. Baseball arbitrators must pick one side or the other. This is really close. 3 factors seem to go more on the Korea side. 3 factors seem to go more on the Astros side based on the arguments that were made. The thing I'm going to come down to as an arbitrator, right? Arbitrators don't just make up out of whole cloth, right? We make comparisons to other examples that we see. We follow the standards in the industry, in our industry, baseball and performance here. And so I'm afraid to say that I didn't see quite enough evidence of a comparator that could justify me going to the $5 million salary. So unfortunately, I am going to have to rule in favor of the Astros here and award the $4.25 million salary. It's going to be tough for Korea to get by on only $4.25 million a year, but I believe the Astros will be able to pay that amount given their gigantic earnings due to their recent performance. But very well argued from both sides. I think they both did equally excellent jobs of arguing their cases, so congratulations to both sets of advocates. job.
This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, excellent job, guys.
I think we'll be
Thank you all for coming out. Thank you, Dean Colvin, for arbitrating, and great job to both teams.
Pizza in the student lounge.